Lieutenant General Ben Hodges is a frequent guest here. He's a former U.S. Army commander of Europe. Terrific insight on the Ukraine-Russia war. Welcome back, sir.
Dana, thank you very much for the privilege.
Thank you. And of course, the first thing I'm going to ask you about has nothing to do with Ukraine. So Russia, let's put Russia aside for 1 minute. As we speak, Israel has negotiated with Hamas through Qatar, as you know, for the release of 50 hostages over 4 days for a pause. It's not officially a ceasefire, but you call it what you want to. The first time I met you was in Iraq, as you were commanding forces as a young lieutenant colonel with 101st Airborne through urban areas. I mean, they're a lot different than Gaza, but there are similarities. How would you feel if you were a commander on the ground being told, stop for a minute, hold, and wait while we try to get some hostages out? A very complicated situation.
Yeah, well, obviously, if this hostage deal does come to pass, it's great news for those 50 people as well as their families. But this comes with a cost, and you allude to that. The Israeli Defense Force, I would imagine, will be frustrated that they're having to stop, because they clearly are pounding Hamas. I mean, that's the only reason Hamas would have agreed to any sort of thing like this, is because they are suffering and they need the benefit of a break of some sort. The part of the agreement that struck me as most what would be most annoying to me is the agreement to stop any sort of drone ISR flights overhead, that kind of thing. Now, the Israeli Defense Force has many other means for collecting intelligence, but that one in particular, that would have been annoying. Having said that, the Israeli Defense Force is very professional. They understand that what is most militarily expedient is not necessarily what's most important. It's accomplishing the political objective. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu has been under enormous pressure from his own population, as well as from the United States, to try and get these hostages out. So that's kind of why we are where we are.
What would you say about the kind of urban warfare that we're witnessing and that the world is reacting to in Gaza? And a lot of people think that Israel has to decrease the number of civilian casualties.
Of course, I've personally never had experience the intensity and the scale of what they're doing there now. I mean, thousands of Hamas fighters in their home turf, if you will. So the challenge for Israeli Defense Forces from a purely tactical standpoint is significant. Although I would say that I have been impressed with the tactic that they've used to, first isolate Gaza City, and then they'll continue to work their way further south, but doing it in a way that probably reduces some of their casualties by not just, rushing in. So I think they've done that quite well, actually, while also having to keep an eye on their border with Lebanon, and on the West Bank. But the problem for me with this is what is the end state for Israel? I mean, the mission from Prime Minister Netanyahu was destroy Hamas. Okay, that's not achievable. You can't destroy an insurgency or terrorist organization unless you can destroy the root cause. I mean, why is there a Hamas? And you also have to be able to isolate it from external support, whether that's money or weapons or people. And I think that Hamas and Iran knew that Israel would respond the way that they have. In fact, they wanted them to respond the way that they have, which is why the attack of October 7th was so particularly savage. This was not typical terrorist action where they blow up a building or blow up a bus or something like that. I mean, the 1,200 deaths, so many of them were so horrific, savage, and done in a way that would elicit such a strong emotional response from Israel. And of course, this was designed to create a situation where it would be almost impossible for Arab countries to embrace Israel or continue implementation of the Abraham Accord, which would have been one of the objectives of Iran. They did not want to see the Abraham Accord implemented, and Arab countries and Israel achieving some sort of normalized relationship. So I think the tactics that they've used were intended to achieve that purpose. On the Israeli side, what I think needs to be there is something in the mission statement that talks about the end state, that the end state has to be where Israelis and Arabs can peacefully coexist. Easy to say, very difficult to achieve. But the way the Israelis do not even pretend to restrict illegal settlements in the West Bank, the way that those settlers treat the Palestinians there, and the destruction that we're seeing in Gaza, all of this contributes to the narrative, fair or not, accurate or not, that the Israelis are the bad guys. And so that's why there's so much pressure on the Israelis to stop doing what they're doing. You hear very, very little pressure from Secretary General of the United Nations, for example, about Hamas and what they're doing.
Sure, and Netanyahu certainly would be one of the chief authors of unraveling, when you talk about end state, a possible two-state solution that was agreed to 30 years ago in the Oslo Accords, and Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Netanyahu just poured it, put the pedal to the metal in terms of expanding settlements, in terms of even strengthening Hamas and weakening more moderate Palestinian groups. There's so much there to unravel. Look, can I switch you over to Ukraine? Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was there this week, and he tweeted, Ukraine's fight against Putin's aggression is a marathon, not a sprint. The US will keep working with allies and partners to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to succeed on the battlefield. So obviously a important message that the US continues to support Ukraine, but do you believe that they're actually getting what they need? And you've been a fierce critic of the fact that the US has put this on a slow drip in terms of the munitions that they could have sent and can send to Ukraine. And it hasn't been forthcoming, a lot of it.
Yeah, I was very disappointed with Secretary Austin's message. Why does it have to be a marathon? I mean, this is our choice. This is American policy that this is a marathon instead of a decisive victory for Ukraine. And when I see references, we're helping Ukraine fight for their freedom, that's strategically, that's not what this is about. This is about helping Ukraine defeat Russia for the stability and security of Europe. It's about defending these things from which the United States benefits so much: respect for sovereignty, respect for international agreements, respect for freedom of navigation, respect for human rights, on and on and on, and uninterrupted flow of grain and energy and all of these things. That's what's at stake here. This is to frame it as this is about helping Ukraine fight for their freedom. They were already free until Russia invaded back in 2014. And now Russia, after 9 years, still only controls about 19% of Ukraine. And that's without us delivering any sort of decisive weapons that would accelerate the departure of Russians from Crimea. So I don't understand it. I don't understand why they keep saying this ridiculous, we're with you for as long as it takes. I mean, what does that mean? That is nothing that helps defeat Russia. And so, and of course, what we were just talking about, the Hamas attack on Israel, who's the biggest beneficiary of all that? Vladimir Putin, because significant reduction in things that were going to go to Ukraine are now being delivered to Israel. And it creates a sort of a tiering, if you will. We heard the new Speaker of the House talk about Israel's a higher priority, Ukraine not so urgent. I mean, that's a gift to the Kremlin.
Wall Street Journal editorial, pretty remarkable this weekend by Carnegie. The headline is "Time to End the Magical Thinking About Russia's Defeat." Essentially, the article says that the war is deadlocked. The article calls for a rethink of strategy to contain Russia because a goal of defeat is not working. I know you will respond to that.
Well, of course, it's not working if we don't give them what is required for it to work. I mean, this has been a self-fulfilling prophecy by the doomers, whether they're in the Pentagon or elsewhere in the administration, or these so-called geniuses like the ones you just cited, say, well, we can't defeat Russia. We haven't tried. We haven't really tried by giving Ukraine, number one, the unmistakable commitment to, we want them to win. If we say that, if that's our policy, the United States policy, recognizing that it is in our strategic interest, it is in the strategic interest of Europe and Canada that Ukraine defeats Russia, ejects them back to the 1991 border, that would have such a powerful impact, not only on Ukraine, but also on the Russians. But when they see articles like that, they just kind of chuckle like, okay, the Americans don't have the political will. This nonsense about Ukraine fatigue, nobody should be fatigued. They haven't done anything. The only people that have the right to be fatigued are people inside the boundary of Ukraine. So, if we've made the commitment we want Ukraine to win, and then we provide decisive effect, and there is no one weapon, it's not about F-16s or ATACMS, but it's the effect that would help Ukraine accomplish their task of liberating Crimea, the decisive terrain, then this would be a different conversation. If we did all that and they still failed, then I would have to acknowledge that, okay, this is not working. But we haven't actually tried.
Well, I mean, a lot of people would say that there's been a lot done, billions of dollars. I don't have to tell you, sir, but with respect, but just to remind people who are listening, billions of dollars in aid, everything from American M1 Abrams tanks, the British, German have supplied armor, all of the anti-aircraft systems. There have been limited ATACMS shipments, which I think probably you would chiefly criticize, because the ATACMS would give, and that feeds into what you were just saying, that would give Ukraine then the range to really go after the bases and the supply chain of the Russians all the way into Crimea. Is that the main problem when you talk about not giving them what they need to win?
Well, first of all, yes, we gave 31 Abrams tanks. How long ago was that commitment finally made after months and months of dilly-dallying, and now they just are arriving on the battlefield, and we're talking about 31 tanks, okay? There's about 4,000 Abrams tanks in America. So the number of what's provided is not the important metric. It's the percentage of what's required to win. That's the only metric that matters. And yes, of course, we have provided a lot of things that have helped Ukraine stay in the fight. But I mean, is that the objective? Just prolong this war for as long as it takes? I mean, and when I hear the administration talk about, we want them to be in the best possible negotiating position. Okay, the best possible negotiating position is to defeat Russia and eject them back to the 1991 border. So you're right, a lot has been provided. But keeping in mind, a lot of what has been publicly stated has not actually been delivered yet. And we're talking about things that were either, it's not like we're cutting off our own arm to give it to Ukraine. This is stuff that was either going to be decommissioned or was sitting in storage somewhere. So very little of what we provided came out of HODGES, if you will. Now, the reason we focus on long-range precision capability, the Ukrainians have already proven the concept with just three Storm Shadows. They destroyed a dry dock in Sevastopol, which had a submarine and a logistics ship sitting in the dry dock. So that was brilliant targeting, because if you want to make Crimea untenable for the Russian Navy, destroy their maintenance capability, and then the Navy can't operate out of Sevastopol, not long term. So they destroy that, and then they destroy the Black Sea Fleet headquarters. Whether or not they got the admiral is absolutely irrelevant. What matters is that they probably killed about 30 staff officers. That's much more difficult to replace. So with just 3 storm shadows, they accomplished all that, and the Black Sea Fleet is beginning to reposition further to the east. So imagine if Ukraine had 50 or 100 ATACMS, 300-kilometer range unitary warhead, there would be no place in Crimea that the Russian Air Force or Navy could safely operate, because all of them would be within range. The Ukrainians don't need ATACMS to hit targets inside Russia, although I would never be against that. They certainly have the right to defend themselves. But the objective is to liberate Crimea, the decisive terrain of the war. And you do that by making it untenable for the Russians.
Do you believe now that we are entering a new conversation where the political elites in America are kind of reading comments from, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Zaluzhny, where he's saying we're deadlocked on the battlefield, and that the American administration entering, fiercely entering an election year is probably recalculating, and that it would seem that the momentum now, and I have to be careful how I characterize it, but it may be that the momentum now is towards some kind of negotiation to give Russia part of the Donbass, and give them the Crimea, cut off a slice, and try to bring about some kind of ceasefire. Do you think that that's where we're heading now?
Well, of course, this is not new direction. It's only now becoming clear, though, that was always the administration position, that they've never talked about when. I take that back. One time after the very first meeting of the so-called Ramstein group, when Secretary Austin came out and said, we're going to help Ukraine win, and we're going to damage Russia so much that they won't be a threat to anybody. That's when I heard that, I thought, well, hell yeah. He never said that again, because I'm sure the administration told him, absolutely not. That's not what we're going to do. And that's why for 22 months, we have drip, 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 incrementally delivered bits and pieces of what was needed. And some allies, of course, the ones who live closest to Russia and know what the outcome will be if Ukraine fails, they have given everything. But the United States, we have not done that. And so I think this is a failed policy thus far, and it's a huge missed opportunity. But I think you're right. There are people that are saying, okay, it's obvious now what we should have been obvious all along. And there have been several of us that have been very critical of the administration for never declaring what is our objective. And so that's how you end up with bad policies if you don't have a clear defined objective.
Why, General Hodges, do you think that that's naive? That you can make some kind of deal with Russia, cut off a piece of Ukraine, try to negotiate some geography and a ceasefire, and it's all going to go away?
All right, so listen to what you just said. I mean, this sounds like the 18th century, where Russia, Prussia, Austria, and France would make a decision about carving up smaller countries. Here, you can have this part, you can have this part. Here we are in the year 2023, and there are serious people talking about, come on, let Russia have Crimea. I mean, people who say that don't understand geography or history. I mean, if you look at the map and you see where the Crimean Peninsula sits, Russia occupying Crimea will forever be able to threaten Ukraine all along its shoreline, all of its ports. Ukraine will never be able to rebuild its economy because Russia doesn't want them to, and will be able to block access into Azov Sea, where even after Berdyansk and Mariupol are liberated, Russia would still be able to block any shipping coming in and out of there. So those two ports will never be rebuilt. And then Odessa, Kherson, and Mykolaiv also will forever be under the shadow of Russian drones, ships, planes, as long as Russia occupies Crimea. So from a practical standpoint, it's totally infeasible. From a moral standpoint, who are we to carve up, to tell Ukraine, go ahead, let them have it? I mean, why don't we tell Germany, come on, for the sake of peace, let Russia have back the part of former East Germany that they used to occupy, or tell Italy to, come on, let them have Lake Como. I mean, but yet people are willing to tell Ukraine, go ahead, let them have this for the sake of peace. Guaranteed that will not lead to peace.
And the Baltics would say we're next.
Yeah, of course they would. I mean, the Russians talk openly about it. And so, I mean, how many times do we have to keep learning the same lesson about, what is the price of appeasement? It always, 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 always invites further aggression.
Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, thank you so much for your time, sir. I took more than your 20 minutes, but I wasn't much over. And I wish you a very happy American Thanksgiving.
Daniel, thank you very much. You're very thoughtful, and I always enjoy the chance to speak with you.
I appreciate that, sir. And I'm going to keep that in and not edit it out, because you are so popular on social media that when I have interrupted you in the past, you can't imagine the feedback that I get. It is almost like you're, some kind of royal of heritage that you should never be challenged. So I'm very, very careful.
No, please don't. I think
no, I'm saying it in jest, but I interrupted again, but I'm saying it in jest, but there's a lot of people, I think, that appreciate your views on Ukraine, and they don't understand why the American administration cannot cut through the fat and see it as clearly and as simply as that.
Well, of course, the administration, to be fair, they have other things that they're dealing with, and I have the privilege, the luxury of being able to focus on just a couple of things. So they're not stupid. I just think we're going to look back on this as an unbelievable missed opportunity to change the security situation for generations. And of course, the Chinese are watching all this. And then, if you really want to help Israel, defeat Iran's best ally, Russia. I mean, Iran will be a lot less capable if it doesn't have Russia helping it.
Yeah, it's a much bigger picture than some people imagine when they're just looking at these things in isolation. General Hodges, thank you, sir.
Okay, then happy Thanksgiving.